Welcome back. So today we are going to talk first about the Ukrainian counteroffensives, and then about the Russian offensives in the east and potential ambitions now. I will quickly say that I have updated the map scheme a bit. So now I have added colors to signify areas of Ukraine under Russian control. And these more orange areas are still have a Ukrainian presence, and the yellow areas are under Ukrainian control, but cut off from the main of Ukraine. And you can tell me if you would like the separatist republics to be red like Russia, but this is their extent before the war, and the lighter shaded color is territory under their administration. That has been taken since the war began. And I also added these symbols to signify where fighting is happening, or where area is taken, or where I have comments about the situation. Starting in the Kiev area, this area is still characterized by positional fighting. Now, that might be quite heavy positional fighting in places. So in Irpin, for instance, and Horenka, both sides have likely taken quite heavy losses, and it still seems to be contested, really. I don't think either side has ever enjoyed full control over Irpin for quite a while now. And also likely around this Russian incursion to the south of the Zhytomyr highway likely sees quite heavy combat. To the east of Kiev, we see, well, quite a bit of the same thing. I'm unsure where exactly this front line is in practice. One thing I quickly can mention is that this road here, at least until recently, was at least highly contested by Ukraine. So there has likely been more supplies reaching Chernihiv than maps like this often would suggest. So that means that Chernihiv likely is shorter underway in its siege than you could quickly come to think, looking at many such maps. It has faced quite heavy bombardment, though. In this area, Ukraine has conducted a counteroffensive, and Nova Basan was taken relatively recently in this area, and it's not impossible that Ukraine will continue to push here. Around Okhtyrka, Ukraine has taken back Trostyanets and tried to push a bit further north, but it seems that this attack stalled. There were reports that they reached Bromlia, but I have not seen much to indicate that is actually the case. One thing that should be noted, though, is that here it was said that it was the 93rd Brigade with the assistance of territorial defense forces taking Trostyanets back. And that is interesting because that signifies using territorial defense brigades in a more offensive manner than I kind of envisioned them being used to begin with. So to take this into account, I have moved up this territorial defense brigade from Poltava here, and I have also activized these territorial defense brigades a bit more on the map to signify them being a bit more active on the actual front. Also in the Kharkiv area, Ukrainian counteroffensives did see some success. And here, Vilkivka and Malaya Rakhan were taken back by Ukrainian forces. In this area as well, Sarivka was taken by Ukrainian forces. Here there is a possibility that there are some Russian forces to the south of this, and that may mean that they are in quite a bad spot supply-wise, but it is also possible that they retreated to a defense line further back in a more orderly fashion, or were moved to Isium to help with this bridgehead and pushing south, for instance. Yeah, I should note though that, you know, if you look at the units here, you don't really see any in this area. That does of course not mean that there aren't soldiers fighting here, because these units signify that unit is present in this area. But of course, detachments from it or smaller units can easily move to a wider front like this and fight there. So the entirety of a unit doesn't have to be in this area, right? So there likely are battle groups from both sides here, but it's definitely a much sparser populated front than Kharkiv and Isium and Severodonetsk and yes, honestly most other fronts here. So that is most of the Ukrainian counteroffensives, but they also are conducting a rather large one towards Kherson, it seems. And here they have taken Stanislav and likely some surrounding smaller settlements as well. And also Novovorontsovka here in the north. And it seems that they have ambitions of taking back even more in Kherson. One thing I am unsure about when it comes to these reports of Ukraine taking back territory in this war is the price of a mile. So essentially, it is hard to tell what resistance the Ukrainians are meeting when they take these areas that are reported that they have taken back. And it is hard to tell what it costs them. So this is kind of on a spectrum from simply being a quite lightly defended city outside of the main Russian defense line a bit further back that is like more opportunistically taken. Perhaps Russia is moving troops away from this front to assist in the east, and as a result has to abandon some settlements, and as a result Ukraine moves in. And on the other side of the spectrum we have like full-fledged heavy fighting with hundreds of losses to make the Russians fall back and to capture this. In the latter case, that can potentially be quite costly for the Ukrainian army. I mean, of course, they will inflict damage on the Russian army as well, right? But they will be attacking an entrenched position of a professional army with artillery and rocket artillery and more assets to help them from the air. Well, that is what caused the rather significant losses of the Russians in the start of the war, right? Attacking defensive positions, and that was without significant help from the air on the defending side. So if Ukraine um, if Ukraine conducts quite zealous large-scale counteroffensives into heavily defended Russian-held territory, then that can potentially be quite costly, and that might be detrimental to the Ukrainian war effort in the long run. One thing I will say though is that Ukraine should probably have been expected to perform better than most people did ahead of this war. I think that there is a trend that people kind of think that Ukraine's surprising degree of success to a large extent is caused by Russian incompetence. But I think that especially in the West, people have not really realized just how big of a country Ukraine is, and how seriously it has taken upgrading its armed forces since 2014. So back then, we did see the Ukrainian army suffer quite significant setbacks against these separatist forces in the east at first, and also Russia did quite quick work of them when taking over Crimea. But Ukraine has since spent quite a bit of resources into building a more modern, bigger, and more professional army. And if you just look at the military structure of Ukraine, then it very quickly becomes apparent that this is not a pushover. This is, I looked it up. This is the 22nd largest professional army in the world, and with reservists and paramilitary forces, it's the 13th biggest military in the world. That has been trained with assistance from NATO, that has seen great mobilization and has a solid core of professional soldiers. And also in the Donbas region, we have since 2014 seen Ukraine make rather significant gains on the separatists, and that is of course the result of the Ukrainian army being much better than most laymen think it is. However, it should be noted that Russia's military staff have, of course, looked into the military structure of Ukraine, and they have also seen the Ukrainian army perform quite well in the Donbas region. And I think that while it is definitely true that Russia has met more resistance than they expected, and that it's definitely true that they have met a populace more willing to combat them and a military willing to larger extent take last stands than they would have wanted. I have to say that I think that the typical person in the West underestimated Ukraine more than Russia. Another note is I have been thinking a bit about what extent of assistance Ukraine is receiving from the West. So what we do know, right, is that they do get intelligence from the West, so satellite images and that category of information. It gets monetary support, and it gets, of course, military equipment. What is not as clearly known is to what extent Ukraine gets military advice from the West. But I think it is quite probable, actually, that Ukraine does receive some strategic and tactical military advice from the West in this war. But of course, that is not to discredit the Ukrainian military stuff, because I think that it has, in many regards, performed quite well strategically in this war. So that should do for this video, and then I will make another one talking about the Russian perspective on this. So see you there.